Hello all, I hope you're doing well today. You may have noticed that every major civilization has a sexual standard. It's created in order to moderate the relationship between men and women. If it's corrupted, it can lead not only to the destruction of nations, but whole continents, whole civilizations. If you remove a sexual standard from a given civilization, what you tend to find is mass whoredom of the women, which tends to corrupt their soul and break them from the inside. The men too are equally as badly affected. They normally get lost in the magnetic pull of lust. Now, when this corruption first happens in the society, it seems completely normal. In fact, it seems wonderful. The nudity of woman, what could be more beautiful than that? What's wrong with you to hate nudity, to hate the incredible experience of sex? But in time it becomes clear that we've let the genie out of the lamp, and what was once magic turns into something crude, standardized, almost cruel. We see this in the modern West with the development of hookup culture, whoredom and pornography. Gone is the wonderful union, the spiritual experience that happens in sex, and it turns more into a mechanical experience where we seek ever-increasing flavors in order to satisfy the dopamine hit we now crave. Let us turn here to the words of the great C.S. Lewis. When I was a youngster, all the progressive people were saying, "Why all this prudery? Let us treat sex just as we treat all our other impulses." I was simple-minded enough to believe they meant what they said. I've since discovered that they meant exactly the opposite. They meant that sex was to be treated as no other impulse in our nature has ever been treated by civilized people. Every unkindness and breach of faith seems to be condoned, provided that the object aimed at it is 4 bare legs in a bed. In essence, the reason that one may have concern towards sexual licentiousness isn't a simple prudishness, it's a concern for the soul of the society and the individual engaging in such behaviour. As it was so beautifully put by Pope John Paul II, the problem of pornography is that it does not reveal too much of a woman, but too little. And this turn away from the standard ultimately leads us back to the same old place. Gone is sex as an expression of love going out into the world to be shared with someone else, and instead everything turns within to the self. It becomes about me and my wants and my pleasures, and then we want more and more to scratch that itch. What happens in the long run? You don't get long-term relationships, you don't get birth rates going up, you don't get the replication of the society and the next generation. Now, we must remember we're living in a time of deep liberal ideological possession, so if you see this process going on, you won't be seen as humane, as caring for the poor lost souls of the men and women therein, the millions of unborn children that could have replicated our culture and society. Instead, you'll be seen as some twisted, evil bigot who hates the freedom of women and wants to control men. And so the pornography and the hookup culture just escalates. It becomes more and more normalized and impacts every part of life. Disturbing sex acts become the norm. Abuse is widespread, all because we've lost the sense of a boundary, because we've made a boundary itself pathological, toxic masculinity, and so on. Now, all of this madness began in the first place with the notion that Western tradition is nothing more than an arbitrary power structure which wishes to put chains on the individual. Now, this idea was famously expressed in myriad different ways, whether it's class or gender or race, and each of them have joined forces in this unified push for, quote, intersectional justice. And it's not that there have never been wrongs committed on a gender-based or race-based or class-based level. The issue is when we turn this into an overarching ideology that tries to undermine the Western structure itself. But lost in our anarchic zeal to tear down every aspect of Western tradition, we don't really see sense any longer. And this is why on the one side you'll have this anarchic energy which wishes to have total freedom when it comes to sexual expression. It's really licentiousness, not freedom, but that's another video. But with that, it will also push for total freedom for differing groups around the world that the West has historically opposed. And this has led us to the absurd situation we're in now, where the very people who'll push this sort of radical feminism, radical notions of freedom for women, will also promote Islam. Islam itself being hyper-conservative in its orientation, especially towards women. Now, as I've explored on the video before, both of these completely opposing movements are only held together by their shared hatred of the white Western male. I've often said it's unwise to fall into anger and hatred because it can blind your judgment. You can move away from truth. This is why, while I think radical feminism and our modern ideology around sex is completely destructive, I can sympathise with people's desire to be free from a tyrannical structure. Similarly, with Islam, I can understand its desire to want to have a standard around sex in order to maintain the sanctity of the family, but I can also see that it tends to go way too far. Now on your screen is a clip from Belgium, and it features a Muslim woman. You can see she's got the face veil on, but she's got her arms out. And a group of young Muslims who I guess live in the area take it upon themselves to implement mob justice, and they kick her to the floor. And as you can see, there's the kick there. And obviously this is just exceptionally cruel. I mean, we may have differing beliefs about modesty and the clothes a woman should wear, but this is just not the way to deal with it in a European nation. Another tragic element of this video is the Europeans, as usual, just moseying on by. Half of them will be liberals who'll just pretend it's not happening. And the other half, of course, will just pretend it's not happening because they don't want to get involved in any violence or get stabbed. And of course, if some liberal type stumbled across this video, they'd accuse me of bigotry. You know, why are you playing this? This happens in every group. You're just picking on the Muslims because they're brown and you're a bigot and you hate them, yada yada. Of course, really, that's just a defence mechanism to turn the harsh realities of the modern West back into a frame that they're comfortable with, that they can understand, so they don't have to look the harshness and brutality of life in the face. Of course, those of us who've been paying attention to this have known for a while that Islam is something of a problem. Here's a Muslim woman in Scotland letting us know what she thinks about Western women.
Women go to nightclubs in skimpy outfits. Men will objectify them. This would not happen if they wore a hijab or just covered up. When women go out late at night and drink alcohol and dance provocatively, it doesn't signal that they are a person that should be respected. Instead, it signals that this is a female that doesn't respect herself. Showing flesh online in exchange for clicks, likes, attention or money is a form of prostitution. Keep your daughters and sisters away from such degeneracy and self-destruction. Women who engage in such behaviours are less likely to be good wives or stable mothers also.
Now, as some people have pointed out on Twitter, the problem with this ideology is that it gives Muslim men a license to basically abuse scantily clad women or even girls in the Western world. We've obviously seen that with the grooming gangs. However, we have to face a harsh reality here in that there is something in what this Muslim lady is saying. Yes, she's been completely excessive in saying all women should wear a hijab, but she is making a fair point about the excess degeneracy going on in the Western world, which is corrupting our women and girls. I think we have to be brutally honest and say, while the Muslims have an extremely tyrannical and draconian standard, at least they have a standard. In the Western world, everything's fallen apart. You know, we have teenage girls being influenced by Miley Cyrus, who's basically just a professional whore, twerking around as if it's somehow transgressive art in the mould of John Lennon or Jimi Hendrix, when in the reality, all she's doing is teaching her 12-year-old fan base how to act like a prostitute. Because of the state of Western modernity, the rapacious record labels with their questionable ownership love this drama. They love promoting it because it gets more clicks. And of course, if you speak out against this as a Christian conservative type, you'll get an army of blue-haired radicalised young women feminists armed to the teeth with their Judith Butler theory, saying things like, well, you just hate female bodies and wish to conduct mass symbolic violence against our gender. And you're thinking, no, I don't, you stupid dummies. I fear for the state of your soul, which is descending into hell, not in some afterlife, here and now. But look, in order to understand this properly, let's return to the roots of our civilization. Aristotle's golden mean is a good place to start. The idea here is that true virtue lies between extremes, and we could say in this instance we have two extremes. On the one hand, we've got the sort of tyrannical approach of Islam, and on the counter side we've got the nihilism of modern Western liberalism and what that does to women. And I think we have to be careful here in the West that in our opposition to Islam on the one side or the increasing whoredom on the other, we don't jump to the other extreme as human beings tend to do. That's why I warn about anger. Instead, I think we should try and find balance, and of course, as you might imagine, I believe we can find that in our historic tradition. The Christian line, roughly speaking, is something like it's up to the man to deal with lust in his life because that sin can pull him right down to hell, corrupt his soul and his societies with it. The woman has to err on the side of modesty. Of course, she can look nice, but not to tempt men. The idea here isn't to deny her body, her mind and what she truly is to fulfill her true nature and show her that she is more than just a sexual dimension. I am under no illusions that this isn't going to happen in the modern Western world. We are just too corrupted at this point. The temptation of the world too strong, the promise of money too great, the desire to be lusted after by the opposite sex, the want to have women at your fingertips, whether it's pornography, hookup culture, or prostitution. These things are very hard for men to say no to, especially if they don't have a transcendent dimension within. Now, I do believe this has been done purposefully to the Western world by bad faith actors. They know you can undermine a civilization if you can lock men in lust and tie women to whoredom, which devalues them by its very nature. However, I wouldn't say all is yours quite yet. As I often say, you can't just convince people to turn away from the temptations of modernity. But as things start to collapse and fall apart around us, when we realise you can't just endlessly hack away at your own foundations without things falling apart, people will start yearning for deeper meaning as things get more chaotic and dangerous. It will be at this time we'll perhaps have the one great opportunity to move Western man and Western woman away from the obsession with the self, the illusion that individual pleasure and status will complete you. It's a complete myth, this, and we have to go back to the stronger foundations of love, God, tradition, nation, and family. Only with these transcendent causes can we overcome the darkness of the age. This is, of course, a major mission of mine on the sister channel, The Sacred Way. We have to be ready for the future, for this great rebirth as I see it. Whether it's 10 years, 20 years, or 50 years, we must work to be prepared for it. Do join that channel if you're interested. Other than that, check out the Substack and do consider subscribing to this channel if you're new.